I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be alive. I shouldn't have these words that I can speak, but I do. You see, when I was as my mom tells me, when I was 2 years old, I fell off a dock into the water and was drowned. My aunt had to pull me out. I was 3 years old. I was hit by a car running out into the street. When I was 15 years old, driving in a car, hit a ditch, and years later, someone hit that same ditch and die. I can remember going out with this gal, living the party life, and suddenly she, for reasons of her own, left. I'm heartbroken. This was the first girl I ever fell in love with. And I thought, okay, I'm going to end it. And I can remember sitting there with a gun in my hand and a little Gideon's Bible in the other, putting the gun to my head and crying out to God saying, how can this be that this person left me? Life ain't worth living. And I remember throwing this Gideon's Bible. It was brand new. It was given to me in grade school. And I threw it on the table. It hit on end, opened up flat, and it flabbergasted because you couldn't hold this Bible open. So I remember picking this Bible up and reading it. And it was John chapter 6. And I remember just what I read perplexed me enough. For what it did was, by His grace, the gun I had in one hand and the Bible in the other, that it perplexed me enough where I put the gun down. But God's tapping on the shoulder didn't stop because I wasn't answering His call. I remember going to the last LAV raft race, and in my party years of drinking and drugs, sitting there, and I drank a pint of gin. I don't know how many beers and whatever drugs were around in the area. And next thing I know, I'm out. Again, stopped breathing. Someone woke me up. I was vomiting blood. And yet, why? I sit there and ask myself, why am I still alive? It doesn't make sense that all these things that I've done, I'm still alive. But God's not done with me yet. I'm not answering His call. Because it didn't take very long for me to put myself in another situation. I can remember driving home from a wedding reception. And on the way home, I hit a telephone pole head on. And I remember literally watching the telephone pole pass right beside me. Literally could see it pass beside me. And I pulled off the side of the road. Because it woke me out of a stark sobriety. And I looked back as I got out of my Jeep and looked at the telephone pole and all the dust that was around it, and I'm all in one piece. My car is all in one piece, and the telephone pole is still there. It's like, I hit it. It was right beside me. I could have put my nose against it. I was that close to it. And either the telephone pole disappeared or I did. It was like I was taken through it without any harm to me whatsoever. And yet I still wasn't answering the call. And then I can remember God told me at the moment my son was conceived, He said, Brian, don't. And yet I did. And then after he was born, I still was not stopping the drugs, not stopping the drinking. And something had happened. And I remember getting on my knees that night saying, God, if you do this, I'll stop the drugs. And he took me up on it. At that very moment, when the realization that he heard my very prayer that I had spoken privately, no one else heard but him, and that prayer was answered in such a way that there was no disputing that he had done it, I was put on the spot. And at that very moment, I was free from drugs. That was the last day I had done drugs. And that was over 30 some years ago. But I still wasn't answering the tapping on the shoulder. And then one day, a friend of mine called me up, says, hey, there's a Promise Keepers event over in the Pontiac Silverdome. You want to go? I got an extra ticket. Sure, let's go. I don't have anything going. Nothing's happening. So I went down there. And it was so interesting how every speaker spoke. It was like he was speaking right to me, right into my heart. Every word was just penetrating. It was truth. And there was no denying that he was calling me, prodding me again, tapping on the shoulder. And I remember them praying and looking around the Pontiac Silverdome. And he had asked everyone to join hands. And I looked around the Silverdome and I could see where I was sitting. And I looked off to my left and right and followed the circle all the way around. And it was a continual circle of men. Layer after layer, row upon row of men praying. And that struck me. That these all were doing so for a purpose and a reason. They had something that I didn't have, and I wanted it. With every part of my being, I wanted it. So they gave that altar call, and I remember going down to the floor of the Silverdome and just falling on my face, and I remember weeping and crying, so much so that it's disgusting when I say it, but it was just, stuff was coming out of my mouth and my nose just onto the ground in a continual stream. And people didn't care. They put their hands on me and they were laying hands on me, and I was just crying out to God and asking for Jesus to come into my heart in the words that they were speaking about and having him in me. And I remember in April of 1995 being born again. And my life hasn't been the same since. The constant tapping on the shoulder of my life, I finally had answered his call. And I remember going home and speaking to my wife, saying, right now I'm on fire for the Lord. If he told me to go to Africa, I'm going to Africa. If he told me to go here, I'm going there. Whatever he tells me to do, I'm doing it. And little did I know that he would take me up on it. Because I had my failures as well. Because I can remember going back to a church that I was going to, but I really didn't belong. I just was taking up pew space. But this time I was there with a purpose. This time I was there with a commitment and a faith that I never had before. And I remember for the first time hearing him say, Brian, go over there and lay hands on that person. And that feeling of fear going, who am I, Lord, to go over there and lay hands on that person? Who am I to touch that? And say, a person that's in a wheelchair, you can go over and lay hands on them. Tell them to get up, to wake up. Who am I, Lord? And I sat there frozen in fear because like I didn't believe in myself. But what I didn't realize is God believed in me. God was calling me. God does it, not me. I don't have to do anything. I just got to be obedient. It's all the rest of it's up to Him to do. It took me a long time to realize that. And I can remember I would sit there and read His Word over and over. I couldn't get enough of it. I remember I must have bought probably 50, 60 books within the first 2 months of being born again. It's like I could not get enough. It was go to the store, buy another one, buy another book, and just read and read, and start going to cell groups and Bible studies, and just I had an appetite that couldn't be filled. And it can't be filled even today. I cannot get enough sometimes. Other times it's like there's so much there, I'm so full I got to digest what I have before me. But that hunger and thirst is there. But not always my understanding, because I remember being asked to be a cell group leader, and it's like, Lord, I barely know your word, and you're asking me to lead a group of individuals? And I can remember hearing him very plainly say, Brian, it isn't what you know that they're necessarily after. Let me be the one. The rest will come natural. And it's like, okay, duh, I guess all I got to do is be obedient. So I did. I'd be next thing you know, I'm a cell group leader, leading a Bible study. Yeah, some of it was scripted, so it was easy for me to kind of go along with, but it's like I'm having to do twice as much studying so I can try and be a little further along than those that are going to show up. Yet, here I am. And I can remember in the darkest times of my life, sitting there all alone, having gone through divorce, and that pain and the ugliness of it, and just crying out to Him. And I can remember, I literally, in my bedroom, I remember sticking my head right into the corner of the bedroom, right into the wall. I hadn't cried in 10 years. Hadn't shed a tear. My heart was so hardened. And I wanted to cry, and I remember calling out saying, Jesus, I want to cry again. I want to have that emotion again. And about a year later, it was like somebody had flicked a switch. And now I'm afraid sometimes to go to a movie at the theaters, because if I see a movie that's got a touching scene, the waterworks will start to flow, and it's like, hey, I'm good, I'm a guy, but never mind the waterworks. But to be able to cry again and realize that it's not a bad thing. And if you're somebody out there that hasn't cried or is afraid to cry, don't. Never hold back. Sometimes a good cry is a good thing. I've learned that I'm not going to stop crying simply because I might be out in public or fear for what someone may think of me. I'm no less of a man because I can cry. But to me, it's more, I can be more of a man because I can cry. As I can cry for my kids when they're hurting. Or I can cry for a situation or a person and what they're going through. And empathize and understand and feel. Yet, I remember at work, one day, you get that terrible message or notification that one of your coworkers' kids have died. And this was a person who had reached out to me when I was going through a divorce. He was one of the few people that invited me over to his house and shared with me how he survived it, what he did, and that he also felt alone and did never want to have that feeling for someone else. And that was such a help. And I can remember finding out that when his child had passed on, how hurting it must have been. And I can remember hearing very clearly while I was at work, Brian, you're going to do the funeral. And I can remember thinking to myself, and also talking to God, going, God, who am I? I'm not a pastor. I'm not a teacher. I'm not doing anything. How can I be the one to do the funeral? How can I be the one to stand there in front of them? He said, Brian, you're going to do it. So, okay, I went to the funeral, sat there and talked with the individual, and he said, yep, everything's taken care of. Someone's going to show up. You got a pastor coming. So I sat there in the back of the funeral home. And yet, the funeral was taking place, and I figured, okay, I must have got it wrong. So I went back to work. But the next day, I can remember sitting there at home going, Lord, that didn't make sense to me. I thought I heard you. I must not have. But that next day when I went into work, one of my coworkers, first thing in the morning, came right up to me and she said, Brian, did you hear what happened? And I said, no, what happened? She says, the pastor never showed up. And it's like my jaw just hit the ground. It's like, Lord, you told me I wasn't trusting you again. Oh, I felt like such a failure. But it didn't stop him from using me. Because then, within a week's time, I'm at the very same location. And he says to me, Brian, go over and tell that woman who was working next to me. Tell her that Jesus loves her, and misses her. And I can remember working, and we'd kind of meet up in the middle of this assembly line, and I'd go, and I'd go back to work and catch back up on the line, then I'd come back up and kind of meet her halfway again. I'd gotta go, And I did that a couple of times, and finally she comes up to me, she says, Brian, you wanting to say something? What is it? Just spill it. And I remember going, this is going to sound goofy and strange, but I heard very clearly that Jesus misses you and wants to hear from you again. And she just looked at me. Her eyes got about as big as saucers. And then she just welled up and just let loose, talking about what had happened to her the night before. And it wasn't until a couple weeks after that, the very same person suddenly became an enemy to me, persecuting me, calling me names, talking about my Christian music that I'm listening to and shutting me down on anything that I would say or do. And it's like, what's going on? And I remember hearing very clearly, Brian, it's not you she's fighting, it's me. And it's like, okay, Lord, I guess it's not something that I have to worry about. And it wasn't until like about a year later, this person suddenly was gone, and found out after a couple months of being missing that this person was in a hospital and nearly died. And when she came back to work, I remember her walking up to me going, Brian, there's something I want to tell you. I was like, okay, what? A little apprehensive of knowing the background. She says, I went to church for the first time in a long time and been going. But I wanted you to know. And it was like the inside of me, I just leapt for joy, thinking, yes, I could be used again, Lord. I know I failed this time, but this time you hit it out of the park for me, Lord. You got it. It wasn't, I may have failed in some things, but you could still use me. cool. And all that, I can remember. I'm sitting there and I got my little prayer spot. I got my Word of God out. I got the spot I'd get up early in the morning just so I could read His Word, and been doing that for some time. And I can remember sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard His voice ever so clearly. As I'm reading His Word, all of a sudden it says, even the very hairs of your head are numbered. And I can remember very snarkily going, okay, Lord, how many hairs do I have? And I remember hearing so clearly, you have 286,917. 286,917. And I went, really? So I remember getting up from my prayer spot that was in the living room, going downstairs, turning on the computer, clicking on Google and typing how many hairs on a head. And it says anywhere, you know, from 100,000 to 1,000,000 hairs on a person's head on average. And I remember going right back upstairs, sitting down in my prayer spot going, okay, Lord, Google says that there's between 100,000 and 1,000,000. And I remember Him very clearly going, Brian, who are you going to believe, me or Google? And I says, I'll believe you, Lord. He says, Brian, you've got hairs on your head that you can't even see. And I went, yeah. He says, you got hairs in your nose, that's on your head. And I went, yeah. He says, you got hair that's so fine and so small, you got hair all over your head. And He says to me, Brian, I went, yeah, Lord. He says, have you seen your ears lately? I have to shave my ears now. I got so much hair growing on them. And I busted out laughing, and I heard Him laughing, thinking about, He's right. I've got hair. I got hair all over my face that I didn't know I had. Some of it I don't want, that in places that I didn't want it. But He told me how many hairs I had on my head, and I was just being snarkily about it, and He called me on the carpet again. And He kind of has a habit of doing that with me, of calling me on the carpet so many times. And He does it with such love and genuine humor at it, too, that it makes me laugh. I can remember one day, too, I'm sitting there in my prayer spot again, and I'm reading, and I remember hearing very clearly, Brian, I want you to read Mark chapter 4, and keep reading it till I tell you to stop. Keep in mind, I would read in the morning, I would read during my break times at work, then when I get home, I would do some reading again. If you can imagine reading the same chapter of the Bible over and over and over and over and over, go and stop at the chapter, start back at the beginning, and read it all over again. And I did that, and I bet you I had read 250 times or better the same chapter. I'm going, okay, Lord, I'm going to be obedient. You said to read it till you stop. I'm going to keep reading it. And then all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, I'm reading it. I had started at the beginning, and it took on an entire new depth. Entire new meaning was coming right off the page. Then you'd say, okay, take that, hold your spot there, now go to this verse and another spot. And I remember going, okay, Lord, I'd go back to that spot, and it would have exact application for what He was saying here. He's saying, okay, now this means this, and this means this. And I can remember writing in my Bible going, okay, this is so awesome, Lord. And as I was reading it, entire new meaning and depth was coming into it. I mean, so much so that you can't read all my notes. If you look at my Bible, Mark chapter 4, it's all covered and all over the place. And I'm sitting there going, Lord, okay, now what do I do with it? What do I do with all this information? And He's saying, hold on. There's a reason for all this. But Lord, everything that I've been through, hold on. There's a reason for all this. Some of it, yeah, I did to myself. So shall a man sow, so shall he reap. I'm going, ooh, yeah, Lord, I understand. Yeah, some of it is my doing. He says, I'm going to use it. Part of what I'm speaking about now is so I can share the things that I've been through, that I can glorify Him who got me through it. Because I shouldn't be here. yet I am. We all have a purpose. We all have reason. And the hard part is trying to figure out, what is it? What is my purpose? What is my reason? And I'm still, as old as I am now, I'm still trying to figure out all of my purpose and reason. Why did I have to go through all that? Why was there so much pain? Why did he save me when I didn't deserve it, but yet here I am? Why am I alive when others who went through the same things didn't make it? And I know, having two sons who've been in the military, there are soldiers who go to war and they don't come back. There are others that come back and they don't understand why they made it. And it's one of those things that we'll have that answer when we stand before him. Those are questions that we'll have answers to. Some of those answers I don't have. Not yet. I know someday I'll get that answer. I'm here, and yet I shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that if you've gone through these things and God's tapping on your shoulder, and if he's calling to you and pulled you through things that you put yourself in that situation and you're going, I don't know how I lived through that. God might be tapping on your shoulder and calling your name. Don't hold back. Challenge him. He's a big God. He's a God of love. He loves a good challenge. I know. Look at me. I've been a challenge to him. I know he's not done with me. Because his love is so great. So infinite. And so much more than my mistakes. If you're sitting there going, yeah, you're just got a lot of good stories, I can only speak what I've been through. I can only speak the words that I've heard him say to me. I can only share my testimony of my understanding of everything that's happened to me. Every one of us has a story. Every one of us has a testimony. But don't be afraid of that which is there, the Holy Spirit prodding and poking and moving in your life. And sometimes, like me, you don't even know that it's him. Talking, warning, that little voice that you hear inside you saying, slow down, and then just then you pass a police officer. That's the Holy Spirit talking. He doesn't want to see you get a ticket. Or maybe it's that ticket that you need to slow down. All these things, I say, because you matter. I matter. If he knows how many hairs is on my head, even if you're as bald as a watermelon, he knows. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He knows everything you've been through, things that you're going through. There's nothing hidden from him. My life hasn't been the same since that concrete floor of the Silverdome. Everyone will have their moment. I pray that the time comes when you have your moment. That moment that maybe you can say yes